yesterday's news.
Hello and welcome to Old News, the programme and podcast which looks at the news stories of the day through the papers of yesterday. A little bit of a special this week, following on from last week's look at icy conditions and ice and cold weather and how that might have featured in the papers of yore. And there were a couple of pieces which I didn't have time for last week, which I thought I'd like to share this week, particularly perhaps with younger listeners in mind. Not so much today, but at the time in the papers. I refer you to the Isle of Man Examiner of Friday, January the 24th, 1936. What was the children's page, or half page perhaps, under the heading of Uncle Tim. Uncle Tim's letter, we read. This week you will see we have a limerick competition, says Uncle Tim. I know that you like these, so I expect a bumper entry. You will see that I gave all the leaguers that entered the competition a special prize last week. He doesn't say what it was. So all of you who did not get one of these must see that you are not caught napping again. I hope that all the leaguers are playing the game with the birds on this very cold weather. During these icy cold spells, it's very difficult for the birds to find water to drink. Very true. It's nearly all frozen, and the ground is so hard they cannot scratch it over for food. So if all the leaguers would throw out the breadcrumbs from the table and put out a saucer of fresh water sometimes, I'm sure the birds would be very grateful and perhaps sing you a nice song in exchange for your kindness. Well, a lovely idea, I must admit. I think the water would freeze fairly quickly if it was that cold, but nonetheless, it's a good idea to get the children interested, isn't it? He goes on, lots of nice letters again this week, so many that I am sorry I cannot reply to them all. Many members have written asking me to let them have new membership cards or badges as they've lost their own. I'm sorry, but we cannot do this yet. I have an idea that I am working out now, and I hope we'll soon be able to replace all the lost cards and badges. Do not write in for them yet. I will let you know all about it in this column as soon as it is all ready. I have another competition this week, as well as the limerick below. It is this. I'll give a special secret prize, he loves these secret prizes, to the leaguer who sends me the nicest colouring of the picture which illustrates our story this week. You may send in both if you wish, says Uncle Tim. Don't forget to let me have your competition entries this week. Your very own, and it was signed Uncle Tim. A fine black and white picture of a young lad who could still be with us, of course. He looks like he might be 8 or 9 there, so he'd be a reasonable lick of age if he was. And the picture is of a little picture, we are told, of leaguer Dennis Shimon. Sounds like a local lad, but he was actually of Barrow-in-Furness. He looks very pleased with himself, doesn't he? Well, he's got his shorts pulled up way past his tummy button, so yes, he does. That's because he's just persuaded his cousin to join our league. Well done, Dennis. And then we have the adventures of Peter. And again, can you imagine that in the papers of now? I don't know. I just don't think so, but it's wonderfully of its time. What happened last week? Bit like Tintin, the introduction. Peter Cameen's father, Thomas Cameen, a farmer of Kirkmichael, will not allow Peter to go to sea. So upon his 13th birthday, Peter resolves to run away. He lies awake until all the rest of the house are in bed and fast asleep, and then gets up and dresses himself. Now, read on. ... All is quiet. Taking his boots in his hand, his stocking feet, he tiptoes to his door and opened it. All was quiet. He crept across the quiet, old-fashioned landing and started very slowly down the stairs. How the stairs creaked! And after a horrible, breathtaking moment when the 4th stair from the top squeaked so loudly, he reached the kitchen without being heard. It was not far now to the yard door, and thanks to Peter's cleverness in oiling it a day or so before, it opened without a sound, and he put on his shoes and stepped out into the yard. The night was chilly. It was in October, though very clear. The moon shone brightly, lighting everything up almost like day, and in the sky the stars shone like a million gems. But Peter took no notice of these. He was too intent in crossing the yard unseen, and used every piece of shadow that offered cover. He soon reached the outhouse, where he picked up his hidden bundle, recrossed the yard, and set out on the open road upon the beginning of his great adventures. I can't tell you what happened after that, because that's as far as it goes. Perhaps the paper for the next episode could be somewhere in the annals, if you want to go and look online. And this other one I want to share with you, perhaps, from the Isle of Man Examiner of Thursday, January the 22nd, 1959. The hedgehog has sense, we're told. Douglas and other townsfolk think that they're very badly hit when King Winter's cloak of snow and ice descends upon them. But if you're a town dweller, ask yourself if you'd like to exchange places with the Manx countryside businesswoman who writes the following heartfelt note for the notebook. Brrr, how I hate the winter. I wish I could hibernate, she says, like the hedgehog. I hate going to bed in this cold weather. The sheets feel so icy it takes ages to get warm enough to relax. True, my hot water bottle warms a little patch, but as soon as I move it to another part of the bed, the first patch cools off, and by the time my feet are warm, my back is frozen again. After a couple of hours of tensing myself against the cold and curling up into an even tighter ball, I fall into an uneasy sleep. But all too soon, the alarm goes. Nothing's changed there over the years. Of course, now, such is the contrariness of human nature, I feel warm and relaxed. But I can linger no longer to revel in this comfort. No, life is real, life is earnest. I must get up to face another miserable day. We've all been there, is all I can say. Downstairs I go. The kitchen is icy cold, and though I soon have a cheerful fire blazing in the sitting room, I can't stay to enjoy it. I must dust, wash up, make my bed, and then dash to catch an early bus. True domestication, this, or I'm sure you all do that every morning. A bit of dusting before you leave for work. Outside, it's colder still. The dash for the bus warms me for a while, but by the time I reach my destination, I'm cold again. I spend an uncomfortable day keeping as close to the radiator as I can, and even sitting on the radiator from time to time. Then out into a wintry island world to wait in a cold stone shelter for an unheated bus. Hopefully it was clean. Eventually, my teeth chattering, I walk along the bleak country road to my cottage. For a while, I crouch almost on top of the fire, scorching my legs whilst icy shivers trickle down my spine. My evening meal warms me, and a roaring fire warms the room, but I freeze again when I go to the kitchen to wash the dishes. I hurry through all the chores that keep me away from the fire, then settle down to thaw out. By bedtime, I'm really warm and comfortable, but then I'm loath to leave the fire because I know that the moment I do, the whole uncomfortable cycle will be repeated, and so it goes on, whilst the icy blasts sweep our island shores. Well, they were sweeping it only a week or so ago. Happily, they seem to have left for now, but we still have a long way to go before spring, I'm afraid. And if it's anything like last year, an even longer way to go before we see any warmth whatsoever. As in not at all. Now then, our correspondent goes on, the hedgehog is really sensible. As autumn advances and the weather becomes colder, he says to himself, winter must be coming, it's time I went to sleep. So he rolls himself into the dry leaves, prickles and pierces them, and as he rolls, the leaves are packed more and more tightly like papers on a fire. Then he finds a cosy hollow at the foot of a grassy hedge and curls into a tight ball. The wind blows colder and colder, and the hailstones rattle down on the dried-up leaves, but the hedgehog grunts, "It's much too cold to get up today," and he goes to sleep for weeks and weeks, rolled up in a tight, round, cosy ball. The wind howls and sighs, the ice crackles on the puddles, the snow lies deep in the hedgerows, but underneath it all the hedgehog is snugly, fast asleep. He probably dreams comfortably of the spring, while I freeze and shiver, fuming and fretting, and enduring the discomforts of Manxland's winter. Why can't I hibernate? I think we've all had that thought at one stage or another through the winter, haven't we? Or a winter. I don't want to do anything difficult like flying to the moon. All I want to do is to sleep the winter away. Scientists, she ends, can't you do something about this? Well, you never know. I mean, this was 1959, and we still don't really have an answer to that, I'm afraid. You still can't take a pill, GR, to just go to sleep for 3 or 4 months. You'd need at least 6 months on the Isle of Man, to be fair, if you're hoping just to live in the sunny weather. The editor has a note at the bottom. Cheer up, GR. Maybe they'll be able to send us all into a deep freeze for the winter one of these days. We're still waiting. It's old news, and that's new news in that one. If it ever happens, it'll be here, no doubt, on the papers and on Max Radio. Thanks for listening. See you next week. Cheerio. You're gonna be yesterday's news.